So lately, I've been getting a lot of requests to get air conditioning working on vintage Ferraris. I used to tell people that I just didn't work on air conditioning. I mean, that was the easiest way to do it. And in the old days, when cars didn't have air conditioning, like my car, you would just deal without air conditioning. And even with cars with air conditioning, you would basically run it until the air conditioning stopped working, and then when it stopped working, you just kind of roll down the windows and live with it. But nowadays, I guess it's because it's just gotten so much hotter for most people. Summers are longer, and if a car has air conditioning, people want it to work. And a lot of my customers live in areas in the country where it's just unbearably hot, where they just can't even live with no air conditioning. I mean, the vintage air conditioners on some of these cars barely keep things cool, but at the same time, no air conditioning, it's almost way too hot. So about a couple months ago, I kind of decided that I should probably learn how to do air conditioning. Spoke to some of my customers, did a lot of research, spoke to some of my colleagues in the business and said, hey, listen, what does it take to get air conditioning working? And they kind of said, nah, it's not too bad. I mean, there's a lot of little things that are going on, but a lot of them suggested that the best thing to do is just to remove everything and start from scratch. A lot of the hoses that air conditioning runs on, like these hoses here, they're original hoses. And what happens is the coolant, or refrigerant rather, that runs through these hoses, the modern 134A stuff, just it goes through these hoses because, number one, they're 50 years old, and number two, they weren't designed to hold back the smaller molecule, the 134A. So what I've started to do is say, look, we have to, if we're going to do air conditioning, the best thing to do is at least start with new hoses. And also, when I replace the dryers and all that other stuff, I replace them with the modern O-ring fittings, so that they have a better chance of keeping coolant or refrigerant inside of the system. So the first air conditioning system I started on with is Dino. Pulled the condenser out and evaporate, or the dryer, the compressor, and also the evaporator. So all those pieces had to come out. These are all the old pieces with flare fittings on them. I decided, since this is available, or a friend of mine is making them, Scott McClure, who also has a YouTube channel on Dino specifically, but he's made reproductions of this evaporator. So I said, well, I'll buy yours and just put them in, and it fit pretty well. I mean, it went right in. Had to take the box out, and that's under the dash, and replace it. But the logic behind all that is just, even though this is a low mileage car, I want to change it over to 134A, and this is still R12. So changing it all over, I either flush this evaporator out or just put a new one in that's clean and ready to go. So, and that's kind of like the whole thought behind changing out the condenser. Obviously the dryer's got to come out, and this compressor. So this compressor is still made with R12, still has the old oil in it. So again, get a new compressor. They're relatively inexpensive. And Scott was able to give me a new compressor with the correct double belt, and with the O-ring fittings and all that other stuff. So pulled the old one out, which the only way to take it out is to pull the gas tank out. But got the gas tank out, put the compressor in, got the belts in, all that stuff. Moved a couple things, like the oil cooler has to come out. The sender here, it's crazy just to think that the little oil pressure sender was definitely in the way to take everything out. But while it's in here, I'm changing the fuel lines and some of the little breather hoses and everything. So we're just changing everything just to have new and more reliable for this car. And then getting the gas tank back in, which is kind of like trying to fit a jigsaw puzzle through this little tight space to get that gas tank in, but it's in. And let me show you what it looks like up front. You can see where I put the new dryer and a binary switch that gets rid of a couple switches here in the original system. The original system had a low and a high pressure switch. So these modern switches basically take care of both of it, high and low pressure. and it basically cuts out the compressor when either one shows up. There's the R12 or the R134A fitting on that hose. All these hoses were custom made and run and crimped so they would fit the Dino. Scott had pre-crimped everything for me, but the last bit of it, the last connections that I made, I ended up crimping them myself, just simply because, again, each car is slightly different. If the angles are slightly changed from one car to another, then the length of the hose is different. So went ahead and crimped them, but the short ones he was able to get pretty done correctly. And he also believes in putting these 45-degree angles instead of these 90 degrees because he believes that the turns are better and the less restriction for the refrigerant. But you know, and the ones that he had made or, you know, supplied and crimped were fit pretty well. And in the front of the car, also pulled the radiator out and replaced that condenser up front with a new aluminum unit. So this one is, you know, I don't know the difference. I mean, aluminum, they say the aluminum is a little bit more efficient than the original brass ones, but either way, I think it's just having a new one without the old refrigerant and everything else in it, and didn't have to rinse it all out. I think we're in pretty good shape, because the old refrigerant just isn't compatible, or the old oil is not compatible with the new refrigerant. So it was better to just replace it with a new one, start fresh. So and then underneath the car, I have the outlets to the evaporator that's coming through these pipes. I've splayed them out just a little bit, just so I can clear some of these, you know, the suspension pieces and things. And again, I crimped these hoses myself, just to get them to run perfectly, because as you can see, it's like getting them the right angle, and these air conditioning hoses are pretty stiff. So you kind of have to get the crimps exact so that it lays where it's supposed to be and doesn't touch anything. So I did that. The last thing I gotta do is just insulate those outlet pipes from the evaporator, just to keep the air in that plenum box air tight and sealed away from the outside temperature, because that will end up being the cold box. So all that in there, anything that leaks out of there, is the air conditioning inefficiency. So I'm gonna seal that. I've already put some putty here to seal up the evaporator drain tube. That's ready to go. So just got to do that, and then getting really close to buttoning everything up and filling it up with refrigerant, running the car and checking out the system. So I got everything back in and evacuated the system, and it's holding pressure and runs and all this other stuff. So eventually I'm going to test it to see if it holds pressure, but air conditioning blows cold, everything's showing the way it's supposed to be. I just want to run it for a couple days. I have to do a couple other mechanical things on this car before I can actually drive it, but already tested the air conditioning. It looks pretty good, so it was time to move on to the second car. On this particular car, I started to tear it apart, and one of the things I was really worried about is that the fitting for the evaporator is underneath the dash. And I was really concerned about how much access I was going to have. I don't think on this particular car was I going to replace the evaporator. It could be. It's a chance that I'm willing to take. It looks like it's in pretty good shape, the car itself, and I figured what I'd do is at least get to the evaporator, take a look at it. I can actually make up custom hoses where I would use the new barrier hose and just put a flare fitting where the evaporator is. That way, at least 90% of the air conditioning system has been replaced with new, and the only weak point is the evaporator. If we have leaks in the evaporator, well then, you know, we'll have to take the dash out. But I'm trying to save some energy and some money and some labor by cleaning out the evaporator and then flushing the system out, and then everything else is going to be brand new, including the compressor. So I'll show you how far I got on this car. Looking at the dash, I had to take quite a bit of this dash out for the C4, just to get inside here to these fittings. So you can see how I had to take the side panel of this center console out to get to these fittings, because the fittings are inside the car, and they're flare fittings, and but it looks in pretty good shape. I mean, you can still see the original tag, on the hoses that were made, but I'm getting fittings and also barrier hose that fits to here, and I think I can access it from the other side, but the biggest concern I had was the getting access here. So after removing all the insulation and the tar, I've gotten to this part. So I think all looks pretty straightforward. I can get the pieces and replace that. I can change the orifice tube, I can change the bends and all that other stuff. So that's that part. The next thing I wanted to do was to remove the compressor. So the compressor had to come out, and that's on this bracket and the belts and everything like that. So I got that out. It wasn't too bad. And then what I did was I put them on the bench. So this is what I found. I'm going to replace the compressor, mainly because, again, it's a 50-year-old compressor. We don't know the history of it. And to get a new one is relatively inexpensive, especially if we're going to go through it. The other thing is the fittings on the old compressor are still R12. No idea what and how much this was using or when was the last time it was used. I do know that the system was empty, so it just looked good, but it wasn't really holding anything, or anything was already in it. So this is the time for me to just get a new compressor. However, you have to transfer a couple of the things over, like these studs and a couple little brackets here and there, and also the pulley. Well, when I took the pulley out, I found something interesting. The pulley itself was seized, the bearing was seized. So normally this center hub will free spin unless the electromagnet kind of engages it, like this one. I have a clutch here that will show you. See how this center section should spin freely when it's not engaged. But this one, completely seized, does not turn. So this center hub is locked to the outer hub. So what that means is that this was basically spinning the whole time and engaged, even if the magnet wasn't engaging the compressor. That could mean a lot of things. I mean, I can tell that the compressor is still turning. You can feel it, and it's still spinning, but and it still seems to be doing a little bit of suction and pressurizing. But the fact that this was engaged all the time, I mean, it was just running all the time when this car was running, and who knows how much oil was in it and all that other stuff. And luckily it hasn't seized or blew up or anything like that, but certainly not healthy for a compressor to be running and not doing anything, and just basically running itself to death. So I think the smarter thing is to put a new compressor in. That way we know how many hours are on it. We know what the system is. It's also got the 134A. I don't have to worry about flushing this one out. Who knows how much life is left in this compressor after being engaged all those times. And so putting a new one in and putting the right oil in and all that other stuff and just running it from start, I think that's the way we're going to go. But we're just going to keep moving on with this AC installation. So I got the radiator out, and I pulled off the old condenser, and it's it's one of those things where I think it's better to just replace all this stuff. So got that off, had to take the radiator out, and then what we got to do is make adapter brackets so that this thing will fit. I've got the new fittings on the new condenser. This thing I ordered, it took a couple weeks for it to show up, but it looks, it's about, I sized it for the same size, if not a little bit bigger than the original one. It seems to have more rows. I mean, they're smaller. It's supposed to be more efficient. I mean, look at the difference. It's like, this is how they're doing the modern, this is an aluminum one, and it's the rows seem a lot tighter than this one. When you look at these, the rows are spaced a lot wider, and there's a lot less surface area. So hopefully that'll be a little bit more efficient. But moving on, putting on hoses, crimping on new ones and new fittings with the O-ring seals, and going on. All right, I don't know if you can hear me over the engine, but I got it all charged. It's running. Compressor's on right now. Had to mess a little bit with this with this switch, this thermal switch was kind of intermittent. I'm trying to figure out if it's problematic, because right now it's showing pretty well. I mean, this is not with it open. I mean, you can see the whole side panel is open, so it's not really getting, you know, full cooling up to the top vents, but it's already showing about 45 degrees, which is, I guess, in the blue to what this air conditioning thermometer says it should be in the cold range. But let's see what happens. I'm going to run this a little bit, see if it holds pressure for a few days, and also check to make sure this switch is working. I mean, I don't know if I can fix this thing if it doesn't work, but it seems to be on and off. I don't know if it has thermostatic control, but when I first turned it on, it wasn't really working. So let's just see what happens. But it definitely feels cold. I feel nice cold air coming through the hoses, and it's idling pretty well. So let's see how this goes. I guess the true test is to see how this car feels on the road on a hot day. So we'll just keep messing around with it. But yeah, got the air conditioning, second air conditioning kind of on its way. So let's see how it goes.